This lesson is about creating an under-the-sea collage. A collage is an artwork made by combining items such as photos, clippings, magazine pieces, any sort of small items onto a surface to create an artwork. For this lesson, you're going to need some colored construction paper, maybe some painted papers that you've done in the past or if you followed along with some of the other lessons, a paintbrush and paint, glue, scissors, Sharpie and pencil, and some recyclable items. I'm going to be using some recyclable items such as plastic caps, bubble wrap, and cardboard from snack boxes. Don't forget a messy mat to keep your space clean. I'm going to begin by creating some texture on the background of my collage, mixing up some blue and some white paint and painting that over my bubble wrap. I'm painting so it just covers the tips and the tops of those bubble wraps and doesn't get down in the creases, and I'm going to brush a little bit of some white on top as well. Once I've covered the entire thing of bubble wrap with paint, I'm then going to print it over onto my paper. I chose to use a blue sheet of construction paper, but you can really use a white piece if you'd like as well. I just wanted to layer my blue colors together. So I printed my bubble wrap on top, peeled it off, and now I have a really cool texture for the background of my collage. If you don't have any bubble wrap, you can maybe consider painting on with a paintbrush or printing using a cap. Next, I'm going to add some sand at the bottom of my collage using a piece of yellow construction paper. I'm going to use my scissors to cut a wiggly line at the bottom of that paper. That's going to be the bottom bit of sand at the bottom of my ocean scene. I'm going to use a little bit of glue to glue it on and make sure I hold it for 10 seconds to make sure it really sticks. Next, I'm going to create some fish swimming around in my underwater scene. You can use some of your painted papers for this, or you can even use pieces of your cardboard from your snack boxes that you have or various other items from around the house. I chose to use this tea box to create my fish, so I just drew out a simple fish shape on my box and I cut it out. And I'm going to do this a couple of times, creating some different shapes for my fish. Some of them are going to have fins, just so I have some multiple fish of different sizes to put in my collage. When I draw my fish shapes, I also like to draw on the back of the cardboard boxes, so this way when I go to cut out my shape of my fish, you're not going to see my Sharpie lines. And next I'm going to use my glue to glue down my fish onto my collage. I'm going to scatter them around on the paper, and I'm going to save these two little guys for later because I'm going to add in some seaweed next, and I'm going to put those guys on top of my seaweed. I used my yogurt box here to create some outlines of my seaweed using two squiggly lines, and I'm going to cut out some pieces of seaweed that I can collage onto my picture. I tried to find some pieces of cardboard or my painted papers that matched up to the color of the seaweed just so it wouldn't be too distracting with all the other colors that I have on my fish. So I picked out my seaweed pieces and I began to glue them down onto my collage, having it grow out from the sand. And I also realized I had this snack box that had this really cool like design with some nuts on it that was kind of brown and black that would make a fantastic rock. So I cut that out and glued it on as well. And I continued to layer in some seaweed and some rocks along the bottom of my paper, making sure that as I was gluing things on, I was trying to count to at least 10 seconds for each piece or each cluster of pieces to make sure that they were sticking down onto my paper and wouldn't go slipping and sliding around, since we are using liquid glue and it does take a little bit to dry. And once I have all that down, I then added in those two leftover fish. I had them swimming a little bit on top of the seaweed, and I used an extra piece of seaweed to kind of hide my little fish here in my seaweed bunch at the bottom. I then used this really colorful snack box of some Cheez-Its, and I used those shapes on the front to cut out some designs that I could put at the bottom of the ocean as well, such as some little shells or even some other little sea creatures like a starfish. I used some of my colorful painted papers from my earlier projects that I've done, and I created some coral pieces. I used my Sharpie to draw out a shape of a coral onto the back of that piece of paper, cut it out with my scissors, and glued it onto my collage. I then used my black Sharpie to draw in some details on my fish, such as some eyes and some fins, and I went back on top of my coral and my seaweed as well, and just did a little bit of some outlining on the outer edges, drew in some little texture details like little bumps or rounded bits, just to make those items pop out a little bit more in my collage. I then cut out and glued down some bubbles onto my collage, and I was using a piece of my cardboard, just making sure it was facing up on the white side from my snack boxes, and I used a Sharpie to draw in some little shine lines on my bubbles. And I finished adding in some other little last minute details like this little piece of seaweed over here, and I used some of my colorful cardboard pieces to create some other little sea critters like a seahorse and a jellyfish. You can add in any sea creatures that you would like to your collage. You can add in any other little details, such as these white lines that I'm painting in. I'm painting in just some squiggly lines across my paper to make it look like some water details. And that is it. That will complete your under the sea collage.